All right, we're back with the part two. Let's see. It's gonna create a new link, I think, for people. So hopefully people can jump back in real quick. I'll reshare it in Discord. And put it on Facebook again. And we'll see if this is any better. This is the first one back after a long time, so I'm not surprised it's struggling a little bit. The very weird thing is that it's saying that this has to do with my internet connection. So I dropped my bit rate. And we'll see if that helps. Is anybody back?
I'm here.
Oh, what's up? Liam actually joining live. I don't have anybody else telling me that it's working or not. Maybe Claire will let me know. I'm not getting the warnings that I'm dropping frames anymore, so that's the good news. I just hope that it actually holds up that way.
So I said you good on my end?
Okay. All right. Well, we press on. So, really, once I discover like this argument, like, no, of course a bunch of factory workers didn't suddenly become lazy and then decide all of a sudden to just not participate in the economy. Like, it doesn't seem fair that these guys didn't ask to lose their jobs. You know, capitalism just has a way of doing that. So that's like the first thing that makes me go, that it doesn't exactly work the way I think it does. And over time, what happens is more and more of these arguments become really, really clear to me. You know, I'm going to pull up this list of Andrew Yang's like arguments that were really, really clever to me. I can't. I'll pull those up. You know what I'll do is I'll post a link to that, and because it's not coming up as easily as I thought, it's giving me a bunch of silly news articles, but I'll put that in my Discord later. Essentially, what it is a lot of the arguments were that there's no reason to think, right, that in the richest, wealthiest country on earth, that income should just start at zero. Why do we have this idea that your income, right, should fundamentally start at zero? You should have absolutely no security whatsoever and have to work at everything. Couldn't we still have a really good free and fair market system where income starts at a higher number, where your basic needs are met, and then we can play capitalism with the excess, with the extra? And that made a lot of sense to me. So that was the first thing that like really kind of made me go, huh. And I actually got that from Andrew Yang himself. I went to meet him in person. We went to a political event. And I hadn't heard that. I had just gotten The War on Normal People. I wanted to get it signed from him. That's his like big book. And I like going to IMAX for APT. Oh, that's funny. I just saw that come through. I wanted to get it from him, and I was like, okay, so let's say I buy into your all your ideas, but like, what do I say to somebody who's like, isn't this socialism? And he said, why is it socialism? It's not socialism. It's simply capitalism where income doesn't start at zero. And that just like blew my mind. I was like, okay, like that's a really good point. And that appealed to me. And then the more, like, I was at that time still taking this whole thing from a libertarian perspective of the government still giving out too much money. The national debt is a problem. All these things are kind of a large issue. But it would actually work better if the incentive were for people would want to go to work more if they got more meaning out of actually doing it, and they would be willing to do more if their dollars went further. And if we keep going in this direction where people's money feels like it's not worth anything, they're going to become unmotivated, less productive. It's actually bad for the economy, is what I looked at when the kind of imbalance is this bad, and there's this many people living paycheck to paycheck. So I started buying into those things. And then as time went on, my skepticism started to grow, because that's still kind of a pro-capitalist position. I still think at that time, I miss Andrew being, a public figure and actually being relevant too, because this was more fun. But I, really what happens is I look and I say, there's got to be more to this story than that. Like, it's got to be more about, like, why did this happen? Why did capitalism get so bad in the first place? Why do we need to fix it? Like, that's really the question that started percolating in the back of the old brain there. It's like, if it's such a good system, it shouldn't need a massive program to fix it. It should just work and do the thing that we're saying that it does. And so I start to question it even further. And I read all of The War on Normal People, and you really could summarize like the first two parts of that book. I know Liam's actually in the middle of reading it, so I'll be curious what he thinks about this kind of whole thing. But I really looked at it as, man, everything is going to shit. Like, it's a pretty bleak outlook for the first huge part. Thanks, D-Clams, for the follow. It's really bleak. It's a really dark look at where the economy's going, because more automation is coming. He predicted this whole thing with ChatGPT replacing people's jobs and doing your college paper for you. He was way ahead of the game on that. It looks like the stream quality got way better when I lowered the bit rate, by the way. I don't think I've had any drops whatsoever, so that's exciting. Fix the problem, yay. I really was trying to figure out what the issue is. And I genuinely don't remember who's the first person that tipped me off to this problem. But I realized that all of capitalism fundamentally runs on the idea of private property. And that is not something that the average person who interacts with the idea of capitalism even examines as something that you're allowed to question. Private property is a right, damn it, and everybody who has it, it has to be protected. And if you ask, I think, the general public, like, if I don't know if there's poll numbers on this. Let's actually look this up really quick. How many people agree with private property rights? I don't even know if this is something that gets, like, polled. Polls on private property. So here's one. 1/3 of young people say individual property ownership is wrong, new poll shows. And that was from June 4 of 2021. But that's still only 34% of millennials and 34% of Gen Xers. Whereas I don't see the full data for the poll, but I'm going to guess that it's significantly worse for boomers and silent Gen. So that to me, like, everybody thinks, like, duh, if I worked hard, bought my house, I should own it. And then little thought experiments started getting brought up to me one by one. Like the idea of, let's not think about a landlord, okay? Because some people can make the argument that a landlord still has to work to make money. They have to maintain their property. They have to handle all the legal jargon of it. They have to do some things, right? But what about somebody who owns an RV lot that's just there to park people's RVs and toys on and makes money off of it? Literally, the only reason why they make money is because they have a piece of grass that you do not. They don't have to do anything to maintain it other than, mild maintenance, right? And they just get paid. Like, a very large amount of money. Their land just makes money all the time. For months and months of the year, people come park their boat, their camper, their toy, their motorcycle, whatever it is, just park it right there because I don't have anywhere else to put it for myself. And they just make money on this freely. Is that work? Or is that somebody just who's literally contributing nothing to society and they make money based on their own money? And you think of a situation like that and you're like, okay, that's kind of a tough one to deal with. And then the question is, but don't they have a right to it? Like, they have a right to do whatever they want with that land, and if they've found a way to get everybody else to pay them for use of it, that seems fair. To address your point, I'm not claiming capitalism is perfect. Even when I believed in it, I didn't claim capitalism was perfect. Totally fair. Private property is often misleading, but here was the argument that got presented to me that I found the most convincing, that made me realize private property is absolutely not a right. And there's a few different variations of this thought experiment, but it's called the man on the island, the lone man on the island. And the idea is, what if you had a lone man on an island that's just roughly big enough for maybe 3 people maximum? That person's on the island, they work really, really hard. Over the next 20 years, they don't see anybody else, so they assume the whole island belongs to them. They cultivate the land, they build shelter, they protect themselves, they start coming up with a system of sustainable and growable food. And they look and they say, I've got everything I need. And now they're kind of in that back seat, relax mode. So they're in this way. And then a second person comes along. Doesn't matter why they got there. Now there's 2 of them. They have no choice but to share the resources of the land. Now, if that first person says to that second person, hey, listen, I own all this. I was here first. I found it. I cultivated it. I worked hard. I mixed my labor with the land to make a living out of it. So if you want this stuff, if you want these resources, you're going to have to work for me. That's kind of the system that we have now. Once you enter into the market, you have to go to the people that already have all the land and all the resources claimed, and you have to go work for them and take orders from them. Because that's essentially their only claim to property, is that they were here forced or worked for it or whatever, right? Now, the problem with that is it kind of, you think that's not fundamentally exploitative, but this person already has more than enough for themselves. Why can't they just give me a place to sleep? Why can't they just share a little bit of food? They're going to tell me that I'm not allowed to take any of their food, and they're going to come in between me and the natural resources that were there, that they don't own, that I need to survive because they were what? Why? Where does this right come from? And does that seem fair? And the thing that's interesting is if you ask children about this, they know it's wrong. And I think adults have a harder time tracking that this is unethical. Try it. Set up a similar thought experiment with your children. Or ask somebody else who has kids to do this. And ask a child, okay, there's 3 of you. One of you is older. I'm going to go bury dinner somewhere out in the backyard, right? And then whoever finds it first then can do whatever they want with it. You own it. It's your dinner. And would you think it would be then okay to turn to the other kids who were maybe younger than you, not as fast, not as strong, and say, oh, no. If you guys want to eat tonight, you're going to have to do something for me. I need some favors. Kids know that that's wrong, right? And I think there are certain kinds of examples where, like, so for the two men on the island, if the first one says, I'm not giving you any of my coconuts or my fish or any of my land unless you do sexual favors for me, now all of a sudden it seems pretty exploitative. But why do we think sexual favors is any different than any favor? Like, really think about that for a minute. Think about, like, what is, like, at that point, they're holding something over your head and then demanding something from you. So, ultimately, what convinced me of this, it's a really great debate. It's between Carl Widerquist and Orrin Cass. And that's a universal basic income debate. You can check this out on YouTube, where they really get down to why private property, they're actually debating a universal basic income, but they get down to why private property isn't a right. It's actually an immoral and unjust action to take that and then to not give anybody else. You're putting a duty on everybody else to stay off of your land and not touch your stuff. And you're not giving them any kind of fair compensation back for that. How is this fair? How is this good human decency? Who thinks this is a moral system? That knocked down the most important pillar of capitalism for me. Because if you get rid of the idea that I have a right to keep, even, like, look, I'm saying, even if you spent the last 20 years working for all that stuff, I still think you have a moral obligation. The moment you know that I'm alive and I exist and I need help to survive, you have a moral obligation to share those resources with me. Fundamentally, you don't have a right to come in between me and the natural resources I need to survive. But that's what we've done in modern society. All the land is owned. Nobody can work for themselves. What kind of economy can you create between four homeless people? Why can't they just pull themselves up by their bootstraps and be not homeless tomorrow? Well, can't they just work for themselves? No, what we mean when we say work for themselves is go sell their labor on the market to somebody else that already has the resources. Nobody can just move out west. Ever since we enclosed the commons, killed off the buffalo, and said everything is owned by the capitalists now, you have no choice. You must go begging to someone that has resources to get any of it. And that broke capitalism down for me completely. To me, it became so obvious that no one should own private property and not have to pay their fair share to everybody else for imposing a duty on them to stay away from it. So is your argument that theft is okay proved that it's no excessive, or that altruistic virtue should replace natural law, e.g. Darwin? I'm not really sure I understand that question, Clams. My argument is that, again, just simply ethically, it is wrong and immoral to come between any other conscious creature and the resources they need to survive, provided that there are enough resources for both of them to survive. To place a duty on them that says they cannot cultivate from the land the resources they need. That's no further point from there. Simply from there that we can then kind of extrapolate some information. Money as a concept, which is the fundamental thing that capitalism works on. This gets into a little bit more advanced Karl Marx, but this is just to bring you up to what I think now and kind of shape that. Anytime I look at something that you worked hard for and give you money for it, I'm probably, one of the two of us is almost certainly exploiting each other. Because in the system, we become so ingrained in it that when we think we can fairly trade money for labor, the only way that organizations exist for profit is actually to extract more value out of your labor without paying you fair compensation in return. That's the only way they can grow their wealth. The fundamental idea of wealth is that you go to a group of people and say, you work harder, and I'm going to take a little off the top of your hard labor. You don't get to keep this results. And that's entirely justified by the notion of private property. Well, I own the factory, bitch. Like, that's basically how this gets justified is, oh, I own the means of production, therefore you have to just live with the fact that you're only going to get to keep the portion I say is okay. You go back a little bit further before money, and we don't exactly have that same problem. Because if I have to trade you item for item, I'm only going to give up what I can afford to lose. And I'm only going to take from you what I really need. And things that are of personal property, it isn't really a factor here. The issue really centers around land. I don't think that anybody has a right to mill the hell out of the earth and not pay everyone else a tax for this. They owe it to the rest of us to prove that they're using the land that they claim they own in reasonable ways that actually are a net benefit to all of us. And if they're not, and they're going to exploit it for their own gain, they should have to pay us a tax until they're broke or give up the land. It's that simple. And having some kind of system that would that theft is not natural law. Theft isn't entirely a product of, just to address that in chat. So somebody's saying if you take something from somebody else, that is theft. Your argument seems to be that if someone else has enough to share but won't, that person is being unjust. Therefore, being altruistic must replace basic natural law. An animal in nature will have a territory, so your argument replaces natural law. How animals operate in nature is completely irrelevant here. We're talking about ethical responsibilities, and near as I can tell, we're the only species that can reason ethically. So natural law doesn't apply from a philosophical standpoint. Also, there are tons of species on planet Earth that operate much more altruistically than that and share food and do all those things. And if you doubt it, just check out how chimpanzees divvy up a meal. You can go YouTube this. It's fairly simple. They have a cultural means of going about this. They absolutely share resources because they want everybody in the troop to survive. So your argument falls apart. Like, all you have to do is watch a nature documentary and to realize that you've made up this. This is a perfect example of capitalism making up a fake justification for itself. Theft isn't entirely a capitalistic concept. There's no such thing as theft. Because here's the reality. If that person on the two men on the island, just to prove my example more, since it seems to be we have a sticking point here, okay? And Clams, I want to be fair to your perspective, but I've just got to make this point. Ultimately, if that person says, hey, listen, you can either, if you want my coconuts, you got to suck my dick. Right? That's what he tells me. I have two options. The weak version of me, who doesn't want to die, is going to suck the dick, going to get the coconuts, okay? But I am going to become so frustrated internally with this situation because I know I'm being exploited that I'm secretly going to be plotting against this person. We now have a violent cycle. We have created a situation of violence. So our entire agreement is now fundamentally based on violence because I'm being exploited. So I might seem like I'm doing labor, but I'm just waiting for my moment to strike. If I'm more aggressive in the moment, I'm just going to kill you. If you're gonna put an unfair expectation on me of something I absolutely find gross and abhorrent that I don't want to do, and you're gonna tell me that's the thing that I have to do to get the resources I need to survive, I'm gonna say, haha, meat rock. And I'm gonna take one to the back of your head, and I'm gonna take your shit. And now, so either way, it's violence. And if you think you can build a successful society around violence, you're wrong. This is why capitalism is actually unnatural, because animals in the animal kingdom don't do this. Nate says, have you read Progress and Poverty by Henry George? I have not. You sound like him. Well, not now. He didn't write about sucking dick for coconuts in an economic place in the late 19th century. No, I imagine not. No, I actually got that version of the metaphor from the online streamer Vosh, because I think it actually makes the point really visceral. Like it's a lot different than plow your field for coconuts. For some reason, we think that's acceptable. But when I take it into something that I absolutely don't want to do, and we think that nobody else should force me into doing, it makes the point really clear that they're forcing me into doing it. And so I almost think that the argument has to be suck dick for coconuts to really make the point effective. But that's cool. Henry George, I might have to check that out. So ultimately, when I look at this thought experiment and you look at like what are some solutions, there's a variety of them. What I think is that we should be guaranteeing a minimum standard of living for everybody. We live in an overwhelming abundance right now. Everybody has more than enough that they need to survive. They just don't have the access to it because there's somebody coming in between them and those means. And so if we created some kind of basic income system where everybody had their basic needs met, nobody would be forced to take a job. If every job didn't offer you fair pay and fair wages compared to the working conditions, you could simply tell them to fuck off. A lot of people tend to give a counter argument in this case, and they're like, well, don't you have the free choice to choose not to take these jobs now? No, you don't. No, you do not. You must take a job. You're going to have to take orders because you're fundamentally in a position. Everybody else has the resources and you do not, right? So you actually have to take one of them. So if there was a basic income from the federal government that was robust enough to say that you could turn down every job and still survive, that's the only way that you could actually end up in a position to negotiate fair wages for your labor, right? If we started with an equal share of the basic needs of everything, then we can say, well, what work are we willing to trade with each other? So that's the idea of giving everyone a minimum, raising the floor, and then playing capitalism with the excess, the extra stuff that we're doing. And it might have some radical effects. I have a feeling we probably wouldn't make a new iPhone every year, especially not if we knew that, 8-year-olds had to snap it together to make that happen for us. I think that this is the antidote to most of the ills you see in the world. And so here's a couple other arguments that really convinced me. And since I've just brought up child labor, let's make this one. Why do laws like child labor, minimum wage, have to exist? If you think about it, the only reason they have to exist is because we live in a capitalistic system where the only rule we're living by is more and more profit. So if I can get you younger and cheaper, doing more work for me, I will. I will exploit the shit out of you with no ethics and no scruples whatsoever. I mean, this is what the issue is in China. Like, this is fundamentally why they do it. They're a state capitalist society. So all those people arguing that they're communist have no idea what they're talking about. There is nothing communist about China today. Nothing communist about China today. Minimum wage says that all of the incentive is for the employer to exploit you and offer you the absolute minimum for your work. Otherwise, we wouldn't even need a minimum wage law. And if you look in other socialist countries that have a much better system, the first one that comes to mind, both Denmark and Sweden have an incredibly high rate of unionization and collective bargaining. Plus, they also have robust social safety nets, so their citizens don't have to go hungry if they go without work for a while. They don't have to go without housing if they go without work for a while. So what happens? I can't remember which one it is. It's either Denmark or Sweden, but one of them has no minimum wage. As in a country, there's no such thing as a minimum wage law, yet McDonald's pays their employees like $21 an hour. Wonder why? Wonder how. Turns out when everybody can tell the job to fuck you, the only way McDonald's can get anybody to work for them is if they offer a fair wage. That's why. That's why. So anybody who wants to argue that the American system of capitalism is the best, here's some other counter-arguments. The country of Sweden, one of the most successful socialist countries, actually produces more billionaires per capita than the United States. Overall, citizens are happier. Most people have access to much more of what we would consider the good life. No one is going without medical care or hungry. They have an infinitely less amount of violence. Right? I mean, the stats speak for itself in these countries that are much more socialist than we are. So that's really the core thing. And I'm open. There's been some pushback in chat. I want to catch up to some of this. Claire said, if we're bringing natural law into the argument of responsible and ethical humanity, we're screwed on all levels. Yeah. I mean, I think that's natural law. I mean, ultimately, like a lot of animals will, especially social primates, will rip each other apart over really minor issues. And our version of that now would be nuclear warfare. So I don't think that's an argument you want to defend. It's pretty clear that we have to move away from how things work in nature just on its face. You know, I don't think one troop of chimpanzees ripping the other one apart is a system that you want to defend or maintain, because now we have nuclear arms, not just our arms. So that's our arms, guns, right there. So I think that's an important point. Liam, are you still around?
Yeah, dude, is it time for me to join?
Yeah. What's your thoughts?
Um, Dude, I got so many. The first one, I like that you brought up the good old sucking dick for coconuts example. I think that's a good one. I was wondering when you were gonna bust that one out.
I
I
only
guess I
made
do
you
have an
wait. I only
interesting.
made you wait 40 minutes. I feel like that's fair.
I guess I do have like a question, maybe a challenging one, maybe not. I'm curious to see what your response to this is, because it seems like the system that we've created has been like the cause for the creation of a lot of like very useful technology. Obviously, a lot of harmful stuff as well, but a lot of useful technology that can like benefit humanity. Do you think that those technological advancements would be possible in a society that isn't capitalistic, at least a significant portion capitalistic?
Yeah. So I will say it's incredibly hard to know. For all of recorded history, we've only had capitalists to speak of to do the job, right?
Right. Yeah.
You could look at how much got done in places with some of the least natural resources. Clams just said Sweden isn't socialist in any traditional sense since like the mid 70s, early 90s. Yeah, I beg to differ completely on that one. If you look at, they have way more social safety nets than we do. We're already we're already what's considered like a hybrid economy, partly socialist, partly capitalist, and they are much more in the direction of socialism on the hybrid scale. If you look at all of their social safety nets and everything that they do, yeah, this is it's just wrong on its face. Sorry, you'll have to Google
Well,
that one.
isn't socialism like furthermore? It's not really as much like a system as opposed to an action, right? Because like having like a full-on socialist government is just communism, right?
Well, yeah. So socialism, as seen by Marx, was the stepping stone on the way to communism, where communism would have, in theory, created a classless, stateless, moneyless society. So socialism was the intermediary step on the way to communism, as Marx saw it. But how it's practiced in the modern day, socialism's got some modern upgrades, where fundamentally what it is it's a society that does the most to level the playing field between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie.
Sure, and that's like essentially just a middle point between communism and capitalism, though. No, it's almost like the political spectrum. You have conservative on the right, and you got liberal on the left. Isn't it like a midway point between those?
Yeah, right. So like the most socialist countries have fully socialized and nationalized industries across like a lot more areas than the United States does. So their medicine is entirely socialized. They take profit and have a lot more government regulation over large swaths of their economy.
Yeah. Okay. I guess one thing I also didn't really catch right away either or maybe you mentioned it and maybe I just didn't really understand like the wording of it. But I guess like what's your prescription for society? Because it kind of sounds like you're leaning towards full-blown communism, but at the same time I think I also heard you mention like having capitalism but not starting at $0, kind of like Andrew Yang prescribed, seems like it would be the best method. So I guess like what is your prescription?
Yeah, I think you have to. I think you have to tip the scales so far in the favor of the labor class that it really ends up being almost a completely new thing. So I think that you're not getting rid of money, right?
I
Not
think
with
it'd be incredibly difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and it probably would cause so much more harm than good. So full communism is never not coming in anybody's perceivable lifetime. So like what like what if I could, have the magic wand and wave it tomorrow, how radical would I be willing to accept and live with the effects of, even if some of it had some second order negative consequences, I think would be the question I would want to answer. Okay? Because in a perfect world, money never gets invented, and then we don't have any of these problems. But we don't live in that world. So ultimately, what I would say is a universal basic income somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,500 a month for every working adult, and an additional 1,000 for each child needing support. Which means a family of four would be getting roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of like $5,500.
Well, and so that's a little bit different from the prescription that Andrew Yang provides, which is $1,000, 2,500 being quite a bit higher. Is that like something that can actually be substantiated by our infrastructure and economy? Like, is that something we can actually provide for
The only thing,
realistically?
the numbers are certainly there. I mean, we have a $20.5 trillion economy, so this would simply be stating we're going to basically take roughly half of it and redistribute it. Half of all the money that gets spent in the United States every single year would be given to each individual person, rather than rather than freely moving around the way it does now.
Interesting.
Why go bigger than Andrew Yang? Number one, the number one overall problem with the Andrew Yang thing is that people would use it to take away existing important social safety nets. And so my thought on that is you could end up putting a lot of people, like something like 10 to 15% of the country, in even worse shape by just doing the $1,000 a month if they lost all their other benefits.
Well, I don't think Andrew Yang advocates for removing other benefits, because I thought I explicitly heard him say in like an interview or something that he advocates for keeping whatever social benefits you have now, assuming that it exceeds $1,000, and then everybody else just gets the $1,000 on top of that.
That's true and not. So he wanted to keep Social Security and Medicaid, some of those things. But more or less, what he did want to say, any of the cash subsistence programs like FIP or SNAP would get rolled into the UBI. And so ultimately my biggest concern is we need a larger commitment to help the average person, not a smaller one.
Sure, I think that makes sense.
So Nate says, I'm using two separate meanings of socialism here. Yes, labor needs empowerment over their own lives. But so do people who aren't labor. I'm not really sure what you mean by people who aren't labor. That would be I'm not sure who it is that you're referring to protect there. Like people who can't work? What do you mean that's used up on upkeep for infrastructure and military? Isn't that affect by a basic income? So, first of all, infrastructure is actually badly underfunded, and we should take probably somewhere in the neighborhood of half of the military budget and roll it into that at minimum. Would people take dangerous jobs if there was an income that can get nothing? Yes, Absolutely. There are a select number of people that would take a dangerous job because of, look, you're still going to have a motivation to work. If you're only getting like more or less your basic needs covered, food, water, shelter, healthcare, okay? Then you to live the good life, to get the extra technology and the stuff that Liam was just bringing up, clams, you're gonna need to work. And some people are gonna want to do a shortcut to that. So they're gonna do some of the dangerous work. And they're going to do that because the dangerous work is going to have no choice but to offer a much higher wage per hour. So, like loggers are going to get fucking paid. If we had a universal basic income, loggers only making $60K a year, no fucking way. I'm not doing it for that price. Not after what I've seen, you know? Getting up on roofs. Liam used to do some roof work. He was up there putting on some panels. You're not considering that for only fucking $18 an hour if your basic needs are met. You're like, you're fucking insane. I'm going to need way more safety. I'm going to need way more insurance. I'm going to need some way to guarantee that I can get home safely to my family. And I'm going to need all this shit paid for by you or I'm not taking your job. And that's the point. Right now, we can't actually negotiate for a fair wage and safe working conditions. We're not in a position to, because we have to take a job. And so some people to this day do take those jobs, but they take them at dastardly consequences and at really bad wages with really bad working conditions. It's got to stop. Nate, children, the disabled, the elderly, full-time parents, caretakers, anyone who doesn't choose to submit to the exploitation of the labor market. So here's the thing. We would have a new definition of labor under like the kind of thing that I'm proposing. I think caretaker is labor, right? Because of capitalism, we redefined work to more or less mean favors for the wealthy. And under a new system that seeked to deconstruct that, our conceptualization of what counts as work would be broadened basically to anything that benefits people around you in society. Right? There's going to be a lot of people, if you're willing to be a caretaker, if you're willing to be a caretaker around like a certain social group, your family, maybe a little larger, let's say a church, whatever, I don't care. There are going to be people who now, because their basic needs are met, are actually willing to pay you for your time to do this, because not everybody is in this scarcity mindset. So Nate, I think that kind of solves the problem. If everybody has their basic needs met by a basic income, that problem would probably go away. Conservative RK, you mean men. It's the men who disproportionately do all the highly dangerous work. I am so fucking sick of hearing this argument. So let me just tell you, conservative jerk, the most dangerous job in the world right now is birthing a fucking child. And no, not one woman on planet Earth has fucking been paid for it. So shut the fuck up and get out of my stream, or I'm going to ban you. It's that simple. Anyways, Liam, you were saying?
I think that was Roush's alt account.
Is it actually? Conservative Arcade?
No, that was totally a goof, but...
Oh, that would be so fucking funny if that's him.
Imagine, dude. Imagine. It's the same mindset. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, this is just ridiculous.
I don't think anybody should be disagreeing with that point.
You want to know what's another dangerous job that women do? Having to be in relationships with all the violent men out there because they have no choice but to take that to be survived. Just to survive. Let's take a look at the vast majority of how much abuse is done, like physical and deadly, is done from men to women. Oops.
Oh, yeah.
Did I destroy you with facts and logic? Oh, that's gotta sting. Yeah, Liam, so I thought of one other thing to your question.
Yeah. Which one in particular?
The specifically the one about like benefits of capital, like the technological benefits.
Right. I'd be interested to hear what another reply to that would be, because to be honest, like it seems like most of the Western world has advanced far beyond those of like other civilizations, that have gone a different route in terms of their economy.
So as we know, the modern day Middle East was the like poorest part of the world for a really, really long time. Roman Empire days all the way up till now to this day. Turns out not a lot of natural resources and good trade coming out of like Iran.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
I'm used to throwing my weight around, and frankly, yeah, sorry, I'm used to throwing my weight around because I aggressively made an argument where you came in and said something obviously sexist and disgusting. Deuces. Um, yeah, I don't. It turns out I don't tolerate people disparaging an entire group of people. That's half the human race. You fucking asshole. You wanna say that's aggressive? That's your choice. Utter drivel. I have utter drivel. Did you know that, Liam? Anyway,
Oh yeah, dude. I've known.
here.
I've been knowing that.
So
Other
here's a fun
dribble.
question. Um, a third of all the stars in the sky that have name, or one third of all the stars that have names have Arabic names. We use Arabic numerals. Algebra is an Arabic word. And so out of the one of like the poorest, like least capitalistic areas of the world from the year of like 700 CE all the way through like 1200 CE, we were actually making the largest advancements in mathematics, astronomy, science, all the way across the world. The Arabic world was leading the world in terms of discovery. And you could argue that most of the technological advancements, like doing the proper science and math needed to create them, is the prerequisite, right?
Sure, and I guess that's a salient point, but like application of those technologies, well, not technologies, those advancements in math and science and things like that, um, I feel like we're still generated by a capitalistic society. It doesn't,
I
I don't know.
I would say that the hedonistic version of what can be produced by those things is. In other words, a lot of the technologies that we find personally gratifying are useful. But I have a feeling in the society that I'm envisioning, right? A lot more often we would have to mutually come together to agree that a technology should be produced than is massively useful.
I mean, what about cell phones? I mean, like that's something that's not only personally gratifying, but like game changing, and that was born out of capitalism. The internet.
Um, Again, the internet. Let's be clear. Cell phones and the internet would look entirely different. It's really hard to get down to like these specific kinds of things because what do you spend most of your time on your cell phone doing?
I mean, you could like with the way it is now. I mean, you could argue that people end up like I don't know, scrolling through their social media feeds, playing apps on their phone, whatever it might be. But I mean, what like in terms of like how useful it is as far as like our entire systems run. I mean, first of all, you can have like trackers on your phone, so like if your child or somebody goes missing, you can track them down. Um, you can obviously call people from long distance and you can have connections with people you like the reason why we're even talking right now is like built on western technology, you
Yeah, but
know.
I don't know that that's good.
What's bad about having more connections than you ever could before with friends and family?
If the connections aren't real,
What makes them not real?
the fact that the average person reports having infinitely less meaningful relationships. That if you look at survey data from like the 1970s, most people reported having 5 to 6 friends that they could count on to have a place to stay if they had a house fire, and now that answer is less than one on average. You could like people clearly have lost their entire social structures. Like that's very clear in the data. So as we've given ourselves the illusion that we've made a more socially structured world, we're actually like the least reliant on each other we've ever been, and that's to our detriment. Like we don't have a village anymore. It's also why mental health problems are on the rise and a number of other issues. And so like, here's the thing. I don't even know if we end up making like individualized view screens, like televisions. If we rolled back the clock and we had a system like I was talking about, you know, the TV might be something that everyone has to go view together, because it would probably only be worth it to make one of them for a large group of people, and we'd have to make it like more impactful, right? That like, again, this kind of future world could have radical effects, but that's not necessarily. Again, seeing that as bad. And there's some chat coming back from all over the place, so let's try and catch up to it.
Claims I actually got to bounce here right now, so I got to hop out. But it's been fun.
All right. Well, I'll try to address that point some more, but I'll get to all this chat before we dip out for the night. My point, this was from Clams. My point is to say a logger and a soldier get paid the same. Your example. I didn't say they would get paid the same. I didn't say that they would get paid the same. So I'm going to make this point again, just in case anybody didn't hear it. We'd all start at the same before we go to work. And then when we go to work, we get paid extra. And we would negotiate who should get how much extra based on the work that they do. So they don't get paid the same. Everyone starts with the bare minimum of their basic needs met, because you live in the wealthiest country on earth and you deserve it. You didn't deserve for somebody to come between you and the resources you need to survive. So here's your guaranteed minimum income. That doesn't mean that I get paid the same as the logger. I'm a fucking sales manager. I shouldn't. It's the reality of it. I do, but I shouldn't. So this person saying it would shrink the size of industries, again, based on just what I said, is clearly not true. Zach, random question on your thought. In the far future, could humans evolve where we cannot die? That's a ridiculous question. No. Natural. The only way we would do that is if we somehow completely replaced what it is to be a human consciousness with robotics, AI, something like that. Clams, again, not stereotyping, long, brigade, and military service both require a lot of skill and commitment. Conservative jerk said the same stupid argument, so we're going to ignore it completely. And he says he recognized the actual data, but I hit him with facts and logic that he didn't like, where it's clearly that not the data. Capitalism isn't the driving force behind innovation and technology. It's a limiting force. Nate, yes. Correct. But I didn't want to jump into that with Liam, just because I think that that's probably its own argument that gets into some more complicated things, and really we're just trying to look at the fundamental like positives and negatives here, right? So I was trying to get him to realize that the innovation itself comes from the science and the technology and the math, and doesn't necessarily have to do with what we decide to produce with that. So, yeah. As he said, like Wally, and I'm not really sure what that meant. Okay, you worded it so badly that it sounded like you were saying NPay is the same. No, I didn't make a highly emotionally charged argument. I was highly emotionally charged. The argument stands by itself. Let me make it again with no emotion whatsoever. Women, by and large, birth all the children. Birthing a child in the world today is still one of the most dangerous things that an individual can do. Having a female reproductive system is one of the most dangerous things to your health. It's why they have such higher costs in healthcare. Women also end up in relationships with the most violent species on Earth, called males. Male Homo sapiens tend to be the most violent and unpredictable things on planet Earth. So by a certain manner of speaking, it's actually much more dangerous in this world to be a woman. Not to mention you have less power, less access to resources, less access to everything. I promise you, there is millions of women who, if we had a UBI that guaranteed their minimum economic security, tomorrow would wake up and say, fuck this relationship, fuck this loser, I'm out. And the only reason why they're staying with them is because they need them for economic security. So if you want to say that this world is more dangerous for men, your argument is fundamentally flawed. It is completely looking at only work in terms of how work is defined by the existing capitalistic system. How much work is childbearing? How much work is then taking care of that child? Ask a nursing mother how she's doing after 6 months. It's exhausting. There was one in chat tonight, Claire, that it would probably speak up and tell you that it's exhausting, and some days drives are great. I guarantee you she's working harder than me this week. I promise you she is. So I just think you when you're talking about dangerous jobs, how dangerous are some of these jobs to your own mental health, and how much little support do you get with it? I mean, you can't boil these things down to the only way we measure the danger of jobs right now is how many people die. And part of the reason why people die in the jobs they're doing is because they're doing jobs they probably shouldn't be. The working conditions are way too poor, right? No one should be on the road as much as I am for a career. I actually do one of the most dangerous jobs in America. So if you think I'm not biased, I'm on the road for 80,000 miles a year. That immediately makes my job more dangerous than being a police officer. And if you think that's an exaggeration, I can prove to you the numbers. Go look it up. Sales drivers are actually in more danger every day than police officers. So it's not as if this doesn't directly affect me, but that is a product of capitalism. It's because in a real world, I wouldn't agree to the job that I have with the current working conditions if I knew the risks and it was fair and honest and yada yada yada. It also probably wouldn't exist, but that's a whole other point. When you're talking about the TVs in front of our faces individually, like the people on the ship in Wall-E, personal view screens are bad for us, man. To whatever degree, like it's clear that we learn way better from videos, but how much of learning is designed just to push us towards a 9 to 5? It's an uncomfortable answer. So much of what we educate is just for us to grind for some capitalistic end that we probably don't care about individually. So I think a lot of the learning that we need video for and personal view screens for might not even be necessary. And then the type of learning that we would do would probably be more in the spectrum of reading. Clams, I'm trying to be neutral and just see what you're saying, but you haven't really rebutted his comment in any meaningful way. I thought he was comparing jobs, not motherhood. I'm talking about the necessary work, which is usually hard labor work, such as logging, such as maintaining the power grid, etc. The jobs that essentially are required to be done to keep everything moving. Well, again, I disagree with, if you don't think birthing a child is necessary work to keep everything going, then you've really got to go back to biology. I think you just failed biology. Live on stream. That's embarrassing for you. Like, this guy's like, but I thought we were talking about jobs that need to be done. You're right. Fuck it. No more kids. See how that goes. I'm sorry, man. I'm not trying to dog on you. It's just like, I don't think you're fully thinking about what you're saying in a very deep way. Talking about necessary or yeah. Those jobs are carried out to be exclusively men. What is, okay, I'll bite temporarily to my detriment here. So who cares, and what's your point? Like, what does this have to do with the whole point of the episode is I changed my mind about the fundamental existence of capitalism. I don't care who's doing more dangerous jobs based on gender. I mean, this is clearly you. Like, you wonder why I got mad? You're so ready to talk about this that you're jamming it into a conversation that has nothing to do with it. And it's probably because you have some issues around women that you need to get worked out. Just being honest. I get it. Men we're so persecuted because we have to log and maintain the power grid and get close to electrical lines. Okay, whatever. Sure, maybe those jobs would be a lot safer if we had a fair economy. And then we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So it's really got nothing to do with this. It's got nothing to do with. Fundamentally, none of that has anything to do with whether somebody has the right to come between me and the resources I need to survive. And that's the whole point. Is that's what I used to think, and now I don't. That wasn't my point or his. Can you currently get a wage as a mom? I'm not from USA, but where I'm from, you don't get paid for being a mother. Yes, and I know that. I'm arguing that you should. I'm arguing that mothering children is a fundamental, like job that is necessary for the propagation. Women for centuries have done the unrecognized labor that allows capitalism to continue exploiting people. So much of the labor that supports capitalism continuing to go is done by women. And that's a universal. So while they may not be getting paid, their man couldn't be getting paid, right? If it wasn't for all the work she was doing at home. Does that make sense? Does that land? Can you understand that part? That's no, I think you're resorting to some base character trait of making assumptions in order to debase other people. I'm not debasing anybody. I'm debasing arguments. You have absolutely no idea about my relationship with women or what my perception of women is. I just think it's really awkward to come in here. What about current jobs in this system? My argument has nothing to do with current jobs in the system. My argument is that all of these things wouldn't even still be sustained. Like I don't even understand what your point is, chat. What's going on here? Angry King is live. Hi. Welcome to the stream. We're talking about capitalism, and apparently some people really want to talk about differences in gender for jobs, even though it had nothing to do with the original point. I'm new here and I'm 9 years old. I don't think you've made it into the right stream. You probably shouldn't be here. We talk about some adult topics. It's not for kids. You're probably a troll, which is much more likely on Twitch. Clams and conservative RK, I hope my point is more clear. I'm just saying what we constitute as labor is entirely defined by what someone is willing to pay market value for. So if I put that in that definition, it's obvious, we can see that means tons of labor every single year goes unrecognized. That includes caretaking and child rearing and all the work that just gets labeled under donation time and free charity. It's super valuable labor. It just doesn't have a market value because market value has become disconnected from the human value that we actually care about. This is you finding a way to not care about individual outcomes and care more about what's good for dollars. Well, no, I don't really want to talk about it. I think returning to capitalism is probably a good idea. Well, and that's why I'm making the point. Anytime we look at work, one of the fundamental problems in capitalism is that work is so badly defined now, and what people can get paid for doesn't represent the things that we actually want done that benefit people. So I think that we have to fix that. I think that we have to start paying for all the important work that people do each and every day. And we also need to start paying fair wages for certain traditionally completely undervalued positions. The amount of money that CNAs get paid is incredibly disgusting compared to how important their work is. They do some of the most important work in our world. They get paid some of the least wages. And it's just simply because we don't place a high value on it. They also, you want to talk about a dangerous job that women can do? Be a CNA. You argued that being mother is comparable to working a dangerous job. No, I did not. He gave examples of current jobs. You gave a misleading response by using something that isn't a job. No, I was making the point that it is a job, and the fact that how you're defining job is actually limited by your current conception, which is limited to your existing life inside Western capitalism. If you don't think that it's a job, it's because you're still using capitalist system where you're assigning job as to be a thing that can be done for fair market value. There is lots of work that gets done in society that has no money traded for that work because it has no market value. That doesn't make it not work. It means our market's fucked up. Is that not a clear answer now? Like, I don't understand why, like, I have to make this point again, Clams. Like, I'm comparing them because I'm trying to say that all of this thinking is constrained by the current capitalist system. You're just not thinking very hard. You're really super restricted by your current conception of this, and you're not opening your mind. The whole thing is, why does anybody have a right to tell you that you have to struggle to pay your bills and they get to live in abundance? No one does. People are not being treated fairly, like people that work under the AC all day in office get paid $42 an hour, but someone collecting carts in public get paid $7 an hour. I think that people that work harder need to get paid more. You're trying to be neutral, but you're not being neutral. There's nothing neutral about your argument. Your argument is fundamentally pro-capitalism, and you're not recognizing it, and you're refusing to recognize it. Whenever you start defining jobs as keeping the definition that are currently defined as jobs in our society today, you're making a pro-capitalism argument, and I am making an anti-capitalist argument. So you have taken a position against me. I know you think that's neutrality, but it's not. And if this is going over your head, I'm happy to go over it again, or you can come into my stream or hang out. We could do another one. Like, I'm down for it. But you're making an argument that perpetuates the current system. Pardon me for a second, but are you arguing in favor of what is ultimately a capitalist market system, but which can increase its level of social programs and social interventions? I didn't come in before the talk about a living wage. I am definitely not debating in bad faith. I'm sorry. You're not understanding where we're at in the conversation, and I can't help you any further, Clams. So no, I'm actually arguing for effectively a robust system. I think the easiest way to do it, but it would be susceptible to corruption. I think the easiest way to do it, if you could do it and if you could protect it, would be a system in which the government guarantees to every individual the minimum needs to survive. This means food, water, shelter, everything. So rather than income starting at zero, you could think of this as income starting at something like $2,000-ish, $2,500 or so for an individual. Okay, so if I could guarantee $2,000 a month, that's enough to pay rent, eat food, do all those things. At that point, I would have enough economic freedom to turn down any job. So the only way I'm willing to accept a job is if the wages that are offered for it and the working conditions in which I would do it are fair for the amount that I'm going to get paid. And why that's important is some jobs may cease to exist. It could have some really radical effects. And if they would cease to exist in that context, I would argue that they shouldn't exist now. Fundamentally, they're probably not a very good job. They're not ethical, okay? So then, guaranteed, what about inflation? We're not talking about printing money here, are we? No need to print money. You can literally pull it straight out of the economy. The economy in the United States is $20.5 trillion. You could do this with about 6. So we're essentially, what we're talking about is taking 33% of the economy and distributing it evenly, and then saying, let's play capitalism with the excess. You would not, and as far as worried about inflation, most of the average person would end up spending most of this money, so it's going to just circulate in the economy anyway. Inflation's a lot lower of a risk, but you would, good night, Angry King. So then we would, genuinely wondering if that's one of my children. Because you never know.
That's really funny.
So, if you look at what, it would be very easy to get out of politics for a second, right? We're doing political theory and philosophy around what is fair. Okay? And it's definitely not fair to own private property, lord it over everybody else, and not pay them for it. Like, that's all I'm saying. We could have a discussion about how best to solve for that problem or whatever. But ultimately, what I'm saying is no one has a right to private property, and no one has a right to to come between me and the resources that I need to survive. So, while it might be hard to do what I'm talking about in reality, the first thing is capitalism is fundamentally based on the idea that some people have a right to private property and a right to exploit other people's labor and keep the profits. That I disagree with. And there are tons of arguments out there that, I'm not even the best one at articulating them. This is just like the whole point of the series is things that I changed my mind about. It's because I heard really good arguments from other people. It's not like I just like woke up one day and was like, capitalism, definitely sucks, right? Like this is really good stuff from like double PhDs like Carl Widerquist who make these arguments really well. No private property, you've lost me. It'll be hell on war, especially for people at the bottom. Scratch his head. Not no private property. I think you misunderstood me. No private property rights. Not the type of absolutist concept of private property that says I can own something and then exploit that something and not have to deal with anybody else. Clams, you literally assumed my position as being on the opposite, so haven't made a fair or reasonable response to mine or conservative RK point other than you're wrong. Assuming the person you're talking to is uninformed or evil is literally a bad faith debate. No, it's not. Once again, I keep saying that the way you are defining job, right, is within the construct of pro-capitalism propaganda. You are saying that the only teleological justified concept of a job is the one that has current market value in a Western capitalist society. That's not my definition of job. My definition of job would be expanded to be labor that is done for the good of the social order. Okay? So it's not just what you're willing to pay me for, it's any labor I do for the good of social order. And yes, that means child rearing and childbirth falls under that. It's a hell of a lot of work. So that's not me dealing with you in bad faith. I took your argument, but even if I did, like, where are you going with that argument? What's the point? It has nothing to do with the actual argument of why capitalism is fundamentally flawed. Again, you have to make the argument that somebody has a right to put 4 stakes in the ground and say, this is mine, and you owe me work now. Suck my dick for coconuts. Like, you have to defend that position, that it's okay for the guy on the island to make somebody else suck his dick for coconuts. Like, that's the point. And it's not okay. It's not acceptable. Right? It's fundamentally evil and ethically wrong. Capitalism is fundamentally evil. So you can say that that's bad faith, but this is an ethical argument. And so it's not. Like, obviously, I think that capitalists are evil. That's been the point from the beginning of the show. So you might not like that I'm calling you that, but that doesn't make it bad faith. You'd have to demonstrate to me how it's not evil. You'd have to demonstrate to me what someone has a right to do to put 4 stakes in the ground, claim those resources, and then exploit somebody else to get those resources. You're going to have to defend that position. It's turned out to be a much more spirited debate than I was prepared for tonight. I love it. This is what it's all about. I'm not trying to, like, be a jerk. The woman thing, like, I'm just so tired of hearing about it, quite frankly. And yeah, I had an emotional response to that because this is part of the whole red pill movement. People are obsessed with talking about how much yeah, exactly, actually. Great point. Or you would have to demonstrate how the system I'm asking for would actually be inherently more evil to disprove me. Like, maybe there's something I'm unaware of where my system would cause more negative consequences. That's a great point, conservative RK. Like, I agree actually completely. If you could do that, if you could demonstrate that, it would be a good faith and fair argument against me. I don't know how it would. That's completely fair that you don't have the thumb energy for it. Look, I could be wrong. and I'll be the first one to say that I didn't change my mind on this originally for no reason. I just really think that, again, think about children. Children know it's fundamentally unethical to hide their dinner on somewhere and then allow the biggest kid who's got all the advantages that they didn't, ask for. They're just the oldest, biggest kid to go find that dinner and then keep it from the other two younger children, unless those younger two children do their chores or do their work for them or whatever. And if you asked a kid that, they'd be like, no, 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 everyone should have dinner. Like, it's totally, like, why would I keep dinner from them? Just because it's not fair that I found it. Like, I'm older. Of course I'm going to find it first. Right? So, like, kids know this. And then at some point we get so conditioned by capitalism that we forget about the ethics here. And we're just focused on profit. We're just focused on the money. We're just focused on the labor. And that's why you're asking questions about, but what about guys who do the dangerous work? And would all this hard work get done? I don't care. I don't care. We got to get our ethics right first. And then we'll work out the details. Got to get our ethics right first. So, I got all the love for the disagreements. I would encourage you guys to go check out my Discord. I have people chat in there, comment in there all the time. Like when I'm on stream, I'll sometimes pull people in for live stream. Like you heard Liam jump in. We can post articles and have this conversation. We also can do another one of these. And I'm also happy to have somebody get on and actually debate me for it. Man, another pro-capitalism person. Man, so many people here. I would be pro-community space and social gathering. I wouldn't just be pro it. I think our species was pro it for thousands of years. And then we invented money and then went completely in the opposite direction. We literally used to just live in tribal villages of like 250 people for a long, long time. I think our species naturally operates that way. And I actually think the world probably got the most violent when we started running out of resources and becoming skeptical of each other's tribes. And rather than finding a way to work that out through human conversation and cooperation and try to deal with our issues, we just said, fuck it, kill each other. And I think that was a mistake. I think if you look at our species, we work better. It's very clear from Western capitalism that we work the best when we have the least amount of violence and strife and the most amount of human conversation and cooperation. So I would be okay with religious freedom. That's a loaded question, because a lot of people, what they mean by religious freedom in the United States is more akin to the freedom from religious criticism or criticism of religious beliefs. And I actually don't agree with that. Also, religious organizations here in the U.S. have a lot of bogus extra political power. That's not fair. So, okay, but look, life isn't fair. And those jobs I'm talking about, look, a first priority to have infrastructure, the work, and to be able to have the shelter and home. Without any of that, birthing children and childbearing would be incredibly more perilous, which isn't a sexist argument whatsoever. I have now gone back to the woman argument, and I realize it. All questions are loaded question to commies and socialist types. Their ideology forces them to take both sides of the issue to make their ideology work. Wow, I've been taken over by a bunch of conservative capitalist hacks in my chat. This is hilarious. This is going to be great content for YouTube. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Yeah, I think my arguments stand for themselves. I've made really strong rebuttals of all your points. So I don't really know what else to have. Like, I find it fundamentally unconvincing. It's not that I don't have an open mind to go back. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe capitalism's the shit, but I just think you're thinking too small-minded. And to your point, like conservative arcade, I've never argued against we shouldn't have infrastructure to build better shelter and better homes. I just don't think capitalism is necessary to do it. And maybe men still would do some of the more dangerous work that's required to do that. So what? What's that got to do with the price of tea in China? I think if you're going to do more of a dangerous job, you deserve to get paid more for it. I have made that point a million times that people would get paid more for the dangerous work. Because you'd be able to say no to every job. Like, you'd be able to, like, nah, dude, I'm going to be a telemarketer. And then they'd be like, okay, but you only have to work 20 hours a week, and we're going to pay, like, 80 grand a year. So do you want to go get paid $10 an hour to be a call center worker, or do you want to get paid 80 grand a year for half the work? And you're going to go, oh, shit, that's tempting. Maybe I do want to haul some logs. That's what I mean. We have to have a fair negotiation for these things. I'm not advocating for never doing any of it. So I just feel like I'm being misrepresented by a lot of this. I'm simply stating that you need to have enough of an income that you're not forced to take a job. The reason why a lot of men feel like they're... how can you be pro-community and not pro-religion or religious freedom? I didn't say I'm not. Like, what I said is, it's a loaded question, because a lot of people in the United States think that their religious freedom includes never having religious organizations be criticized. And if you have any doubt about that, go find out where the Archbishop of Boston is after running one of the largest child sex rings in history. Go see what's up with him. A fugitive from justice to this day. So, I don't believe in religious freedom to where you're so free of criticism that I can't publicly debase the church when it deserves to be publicly debased. In general, honestly, this is going to sound, you might not believe me about this, but I don't think we would have near the amount of religion in the style that we do if it was not for capitalism. And if you have any doubt about that, go ask Google real quick how much gold the Vatican has. And you'll figure out what religion's really about. I just can't get over all questions are a loaded question to commies and socialist types. Their ideology forces them to take both sides of the issue to make their ideology. I have a feeling you weren't here for the first couple hours, so I'm going to just take that entire statement as completely disingenuous. Mr. Han Fixar Kabbalin. Whatever the hell your name is supposed to be, Han. You're just going to be Han from now on. But yeah, I haven't taken both sides of anything. I made an ethical argument against private property. Communists believe in a stateless society, correct? I didn't say I was communist, and I also didn't say that I believed in a stateless society. I'm not sure if a stateless society would be good. I think I'm a libertarian socialist. I think all of the arguments that I've made today would probably follow most closely inside the label of libertarian socialist. But I think the labels are a lot less relevant than the ideas present, no? Like, the idea is libertarian socialist is an oxymoron. Well, no, it's not. Because it's a fairly large group of people, and I'm certainly not the only one. All a libertarian socialist is somebody that argues that you don't truly have libertarian freedom if you don't have a vote over your economic conditions as much as you do your political ones. So really the reason why we have essentially oligarchic form of government in modern day society today is because none of us have a vote at work. And the whole point of libertarian socialism is if you should have a vote over your political outcome, you should also have a vote at work. That's basically it. Achieving that through redistribution of wealth is not something that I really think is going to work. Okay, there's an actual argument I would like to deal with. Thank you. As it is, the concept of abolishing a minimum wage in certain sectors in favor of employers being able to pay a competitive wage would very much, I believe, increase the amount of people with highly sought after and or necessary skill sets receive. Libertarian is about the individual. Socialism is about the group. Being a human is about the group. You literally can't do it on your own. So that's not what libertarianism is about. It's never been purely about the individual. Libertarian has to do with how much is your individual autonomy respected by others in your group. It assumes that you're in a group because you have to be in a group or you're dead. Welcome to being a human. Sorry, I'm not trying to pry or upset you, but what do you think religious freedom is? My definition would be freedom to practice religion, join, or leave the ability to not. have those rights changed. Yeah, I have no problem with that, if that's was truly all it means. But that's not all it means here in the U.S. That's my point. I believe in the individual. That's an amorphous thing, so I don't know what you're talking about. I'm absolutely a libertarian socialist. I think that individual autonomy should be able to be practiced at an absolute maximum. But I also believe in something called negative and positive freedoms, whereas most libertarians only ever want to talk about negative freedoms. In other words, like they only want to talk about what the government isn't going to prevent you to do. They don't want to talk about all the ways in which you can't do certain things that you want to do because of the societal structures that are coming in between you and the things that you want to do. Like, for example, not having resources. So I'm actually more libertarian than most libertarians. Negative and positive rights, how very American. It's not American. I mean, this is philosophical. There's people in your country making these arguments. I think that... I think that abolishing a minimum wage in certain sectors in favor of employers being able to pay a competitive wage would increase the amount of people with highly sought after or necessary skill sets receive. I wouldn't have a minimum wage. So I just want to come back to that point. If we did a full scale UBI where everyone had there would be no need to be minimum wage. If I'm getting the full UBI and I want to go work for your organization for free because I really believe in it and my basic needs are met, I'm going to do that. Maybe there's no economic value to anybody else, or we can't trade what your organization does to anybody else, but it brings me great personal satisfaction. I might take that. Now, I might decide, based on my personal needs, that I want a TV or some other nice shit. So then maybe I go, hey, look, I can't really do this anymore unless you pay me. And they're going to say, oh, that's fine. We understand. We'll find others who want to do this volunteer work. And then instead I go to somebody else for a while, and I might work 20 hours or 25 or 30 or 40 and get some more money. But I would have those options. A UBI is a loss of freedom. I don't think libertarians would support a loss of freedom. That might be the dumbest thing that's been said tonight. A UBI is absolutely not a loss of freedom. It is the most freeing thing ever. If everyone is suddenly getting a higher base income from the federal government to cover the needs they have to survive, based on a redistribution of wealth from those that have been abusing us and taking from us all along, we're definitely all going to be far more free. So that's just madness. So you would be pro-abortion, but also okay with someone religious standing outside the clinic to protest, as that would be covered under religious freedom. I'm going to be honest, that's not the topic of tonight, but I actually have an episode called Changed My Mind Abortion where you can go check out my opinions on that. I do think everyone has a right to protest fairly. I mean, but abortion has nothing to do with religious freedom. And quite frankly, a lot less people would be religious in the type of world I'm suggesting. Anyway, as I stated earlier, so much of religiosity has been upheld through capitalist power imbalances. Who controls you? It says it's okay to take from the rich, but calls himself a libertarian. Like I said, for their ideology to work, they need to take both sides of the issue. No, my argument is that the rich unjustly already took from us. We would simply be getting finally justice and recompense from something that was stolen from us. So you're not really following the argument because you weren't here earlier, Han. The argument is that it is fundamentally theft. Private property is fundamentally theft. It is you taking an area and saying, I am coming between you in this area. I own it. You don't have any access to it. And if you want this stuff, then you have to do what I say. So private property rights are fundamentally theft, and my argument is actually libertarian because it would be the first time where we would get economic justice and take back from that fundamental theft that was done to us in the first place. I know that might be hard to follow because you missed the first part, but I would encourage you to go back and check this out afterwards and check out the earlier part of the live stream to actually follow the arguments. And again, if you want to debate this, we can do this in my Discord. We can do another episode. I'd love to debate this topic further. I used to think exactly like you. I used to be in chats saying the exact same shit. All 5 of you are like, this used to be me, and I changed my mind because I realized that my arguments were fundamentally flawed when I got up against people with better arguments than me who were making much better arguments. What if there isn't a demand for logging or mining or any other form of work, but the state or certain degree of taxes, I think you said 33%, used to prop up unions and people and jobs for which it costly the individual? Point in case Margaret Thatcher was right about the coal mines. I'm trying to think of where this could go quite wrong. I'm from the UK, and maybe it's a difference in scale, but I wouldn't call your position libertarian. No, most people don't call my position libertarian because they're not understanding the arguments in play. Like I'm calling myself a libertarian because fundamentally the argument is libertarian. The result of it is a more libertarian worldview, but it has to do with more of like the actual definition of libertarianism and not where libertarians are in the current political spectrum. Modern day libertarians are just conservatives by another name, by all accounts. And I voted for Gary Johnson. I did not vote for him. I did not vote libertarian in the last election. I voted for Joe Biden. You keep using that word. I do not think you know what it means. No, I don't think you know what it means. I think you just know how to repeat conservative talking points. No. I do not think I'm being attacked by anybody. I'm actually... I love having an international perspective on this. I think that all makes it better. So, neo-libertarian. Yeah, I guess more or less what I'm saying is almost all current libertarians are neolibs. What if there isn't a demand? I want to come back to this point about what if there isn't a demand for work. I don't know what the demand for certain work would even be under my system. Like, I'm not saying it wouldn't have radical effects. But ultimately, if we're doing something unethical on our current system, regardless of what we think might be positive or negative now, we're going to have to figure it out later. We're going to have to get back to an ethical situation where no one's been robbed, and we're currently being robbed. So until we get back to that, I don't know. And maybe it could go wrong, right? Maybe it could be worse. But I care much more about starting from a position of not doing violent theft on each other. Like, that seems to be a very bad and unstable way of organizing society for the future. I'm going to call the stream in about 5 minutes, so I'm down for a little bit. Wait, what? So they are the neo-libertarian and you are the real libertarian? Yes, that's more or less my claims. I mean, ultimately, if you look at what the word libertarian means, let me pull up the actual definition here. An advocate or supporter of a political philosophy that advocates an only minimal state intervention in the free market and private lives of citizens. A person who advocates for civil liberty or philosophy, which is the important one. This is the show. A person who believes in the doctrine that human beings possess free will. While I don't think we possess free will, which I've stated on other episodes, what I do think is free will is a useful fiction when it comes to how we trade our labor and how we deal with each other in terms of those things, right? However, I don't think you're free to choose not having access to the basic needs of survival. And if someone has come between you and the basic needs of survival, milled the land, tilled the land and said, this is my shit and now you have to work for me and be a slave to me to get it, you're just not free in that case. So I'm supporting a political philosophy that says the state's function is to prevent powerful entities from interfering with my ability to exercise my freedom, which is my free access to the means of survival. And one way to do that would be to pay me in cash. Another way to do that would be have no money and allow people to freely use the land at all and have these disputes be settled. So while the state can be an overly powerful force, it has nowhere near, it fucking balks at the power of corporates. Corporate power, compared to our state currently, is incredibly stronger. And so the true libertarian position in the West right now is the true libertarian position in the West right now. No, you're misunderstanding my point. I'm not against free will. I think free will is a philosophically defunct idea. I think ultimately at bottom, it's not how the universe works. I don't think I'm a free agent that can change causes. Again, it is a useful fiction when determining how we operate in a society. I don't think that we're kind of stuck with the language of free will. Whether or not you choose to show up for work or not really matters, because it's a predictor of whether or not you'll be back tomorrow, right? Like, we have to use the language of free will, whether or not it's real or not. I'm not a believer in a bigger government. I'm a believer, like right now, you have the biggest government ever, and it's called corporations. Right? So to get a smaller government, you actually need the state to push back on corporations and limit corporate power. Because right now, corporate power is actually interfering with people's freedoms day to day. You seem like a nice guy, but are really confused. I assure you, my friend, it is you that is confused. You have bought into basic political talking points that are tired and old, and you think that you can come into my chat, and honestly, this is a David and Goliath philosophically situation. I mean, no offense by that, Han, but like, you're literally just repeating. You have no idea what you're talking about. And it's very clear that you don't know what you're talking about. I'm ahead of you in this conversation. I'm trying my best to explain it. David slew Goliath. David wasn't real. So, sorry to burst your bubble on that one. In real life, giants stomp on us. Period. And those giants are called corporations. I'm trying to listen and understand your points, but it seems like this is just Vosh talking points with a minimal understanding of the topic, as you haven't made a decent rebuttal yet. You used the analogy, Jesus. Okay, so let me play devil's advocate again. You don't sound as you have this completely thought out, and that this obviously has never been attempted. I don't care about whether or not it's been attempted. I'm making a philosophical argument. So practicality hasn't, like, we're not there yet. You don't sound as you know quite where you're going to go if the changes in the system we have are put into effect. How do you expect people to vote for this or go along with it? You're telling me you're just going to wing it? You've acknowledged yourself that there would be obvious ramifications that you seem to think have the attitude of dealing with them as they arise, for which we will have to trust in government to maneuver. I mean, there's a reason it's been a two-party system for so long. Yes, it's called corruption and corporate meddling in politics. Like, this is what you don't understand. The two-party system is also a product of capitalism. And you might look at other countries that have multiple parties. It's interesting that the most socialist countries on earth actually have a lot more political parties than us. I wonder why. That is. Huh. Like, our two-party system is the most corrupt, the most influenced by the corporations that have the most power. So you can tell me that this is just Vosh talking points. It's super not. Vosh is right about most of what he talks about when it comes to economics. So you can just say that as if that he's in a default wrong. I promise you I have a much better understanding of this than you're willing to give me credit for. The whole point of this is, I'm still on 2 hours ago. Where's your argument that you have a right to go stand on an island and tell me that I have to do labor for you because you already own it? Nobody in chat has made a counter argument to that because you know it makes you embarrassed, and there isn't a counter argument to it. Capitalism is fundamentally built on this problem. Fundamentally, the building blocks of capitalism are built on that problem. I don't see any socialist countries. Social programs don't equal socialism. We're probably going to disagree on this. No, I do agree with that point. I don't think there's only purely socialist country. My point is that the most socialist countries, as in the countries that are the closest to socialism, have, like, it's probably no question that the United States has the most laissez-faire capitalism in the West. So if we're going to argue that, like, we have the worst social safety net, we're paying twice the amount per capita for healthcare to worst results. I could go down the list of things that we're getting wrong. We have the most for-profit sectors with the least government intervention, and that includes in medicine, war. There's a reason why we're spending $700 to $800 billion a year on our machines of warfare, and the rest of the West is spending almost nothing. Like, we're the entire military for the entire West, and it's because we can fucking afford to. We shouldn't, but we can. So, it's just ridiculous to me. There are definitely far more socialist countries than the United States, and that's the biggest point. Again, not trying to be rude, but I think your response of you don't understand or you're wrong while not proving your point in the current framework. No, my whole point has been none of you have made an argument as to what someone's right is to stand on the island and tell me why I have to do labor for him to get the coconuts. That's what I haven't heard. So when you have a knockdown argument for that, for private property rights, well, then I'm all ears. But, like, we're still stuck there. And not one person. We wanted to talk about genders doing hard jobs and, like, stuff that had nothing to do with the original point. The whole thing of capitalism for me that broke down was the fact that nobody has the right to come between me and the resources I need to survive. That's the whole argument. And for somebody that was actually watching the whole thing, they would have been following it. This is going to be the last thing I address, and then I've got to go for the night because it's getting pretty late. And I got to go play my part in capitalism tomorrow. Let me play devil's advocate again. You don't sound as you have it completely thought out. You don't sound as you know quite where you're going to go. If the changes to the system we have are put into effect, how do you expect people vote for this or go along with it? That's not my job. That's my point to that, is this show is about how should you think. What's true? I'm not trying to make a political advancement here. I think the politics would come if we changed the majority thought. Just like what's happening now, where the Republican Party decided it wanted to go fully double down on abortion and being anti-LGBTQ, and now their party is falling apart like creme brulee. It's like just absolutely in shambles. And that's because when we change the public opinion about what is right or what we should do on ethics, when we move that paradigm shift that we very much need to have, and we stop seeing private property as something that's just acceptable. Like Elon Musk once said that if the UN can prove to him that $9 billion would feed all of the hungry children of the world, that he'll give it tomorrow. Like he made that assertion. Okay? The point is, then you should just write the check anyway, jackass. Like, you have the money to help all of these people. You have an ethical obligation to do so. No child in this world should be starving while some people are fucking flying rockets. Period. It is an ethical disgrace, and it's because they don't have the right to stand on the island and tell those people that they don't get to eat. And that's fundamentally what they're doing. Elon Musk would be nothing on an island by himself. He would probably die one of the fastest. He's like the least manly dude I could think of. So you'd be one colonizer side, not the Native American. Why do they have a right to the land? Look, I don't believe in colonization. What I would say is, as soon as these two people would realize each other, they should try to choose language and cooperation rather than violence. It is sad that the Native Americans and the colonizers both chose violence. I'm not going down the rabbit hole of who shot first here. The entire world is soaked in blood. All of history is soaked in blood. So it gets really messy very quickly. It posits that each individual has equal access to the right to that specific resource. No, it does not. That's childlike thinking compared to what I said. Life doesn't work like this. I mean, it's not human nature. No, I never argued that. What I argued is that social primates tend to share the resources. And if you look at other social primates, they do this quite a bit. When chimpanzees all work together and go on a hunt to take down a couple monkeys out of the trees, they split that up amongst the females, the males, and everything. Not everybody did equal work to get it, but that's because the male chimpanzees don't come back and be like, oh, this bitch over here that's been raising my child, yeah, she's not getting anything. In fact, the females tend to get the first cut. So clearly in nature, we're doing it a little different than we're doing it now. And I think that's just important to understand. If there are no private property rights, how can one expect to have private property? A house, a patch of land, which is in which every Tom, Dick, and Harry cannot help themselves to your assets, which you have spent time and effort obtaining or earning. Yeah, I mean that's just you propping up the existing paradigm, right? I don't think you should have a right to private land. There's a difference between private property and personal property, so I just think you're not super educated on that difference. First owner of the land doesn't have a right to his or her land or food. That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, like I said, come check out my Discord. You can go do that. We can continue the conversation there. We can have another one of these episodes if you want to debate it further. But the core argument of why I changed my mind is based on that thought experiment. And so I'm not saying I don't have to debate under the current framework. I'm arguing that the current framework is completely unethical. I have been robbed. I have been robbed by capitalists, and so have you, and so has everybody else. Anybody who currently is living paycheck to paycheck has definitely been robbed by those who have way too much. And I've made my case quite clear. I don't think you're fully really appreciating it. And so I would encourage you, like I said, we can have this conversation further, or if you want to hop into my Discord and set up a time to maybe actually come live on the show, I'm happy to debate this anytime. I'm looking for people to do that at any point. It's been a super fun one. I'm glad to be back. Probably going to be doing this every Sunday night from here on out, so I encourage you to stop back. Easiest way is my link tree is in the description, so check that out, and you can find me there. I appreciate the chat. It's been fun tonight. Y'all have a good one.